Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk to you guys about the subject of self-sabotage. This is something that I've experienced, time and time again throughout my life. And what I share with you, I share from the perspective of a survivor. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I am my mother's former scapegoat. And I come from a family that chose to enable her dysfunction and normalize her personality disorder and her serious mental health issues, regardless of how it shaped me and the trauma that it caused me as her daughter. From childhood through adulthood, I was to carry the responsibility and consequences of another adult's emotional dysregulation, emotional sickness and disorder as my fault, as my burden. And I was to keep my mouth shut about this entire dynamic and what went on behind closed doors. So today, I'm a personal development coach, and I chose to channel my life experiences. I chose to utilize my life experiences, in the hopes that I can bring sanity and healing and validation for anybody who is going through scapegoating, and anybody who came out of dysfunctional family systems and who has undergone through the trauma, the complex trauma of not being seen or heard or validated or loved by their own family. Now, the thing about self-sabotage is that we actually might not know at all that we are doing it as we are doing it. In fact, it's really likely that you don't know you're doing it when you're doing it. And even if you do know that you're self-sabotaging, your instinctual response, like the body's pull, that backwards pull, it may override any rational thinking. And you may actually feel like you're completely losing control of yourself, or that you're not driving anymore. You're like not in control of your life at all. And you're not in control of the direction that your life is taking either. In fact, when we self-sabotage, we're basically stuck in autopilot mode. It's like we're repeating all the things that we've been taught and that we've internalized since we were small, in loops over and over and over again. So maybe you set a career goal for yourself, for example, or maybe you meet someone new, somebody that you like, or maybe you decided to get healthy. Maybe you're starting to make steps towards your personal development, towards your dreams, towards your personal goals. And then suddenly you start to feel depressed for no reason. Suddenly you start getting flashbacks that reinforce that feeling of how useless you are, or how pointless everything is, and how, just how this is not going to work, and you got to give up what you're doing. Self-sabotage will cause for us to have feelings of hatred towards ourselves. That's how it can manifest. It can manifest as self-hatred. It can manifest as restlessness, like this constant sense of discomfort. Like you can never just be in one place. You can't be mindful of what you're doing in the now, because you always have to keep looking to the future, to the past, or there's always something else. It feels like running away. It's running away. It's an overwhelming urge to escape the situation any situation, like escape everything that you do. It's also imposter syndrome. If you feel all of a sudden you start feeling like a fraud, you doubt your accomplishments, and you fear that you'll be exposed as a fake. And I mean, this can also lead for you to be extremely depressed, for example. Like all of a sudden, you're doing what you're supposed to do, And all of a sudden, there's this feeling of like depression that takes over, and you have flashbacks and memories of what your dysfunctional family said to you, or the voices of your dysfunctional family, of, you know, a dysregulated parent in your mind that criticized you, and all of a sudden that becomes amplified, you know. Self-sabotage can also manifest like as procrastination. You know, you continuously delaying what you need to do, and this is tied to avoidance, and it's also, you know, perfectionism to the point where you can get yourself sick. You set such high standards for yourself and for the people around you that you end up just exhausting yourself. You end up being unable to act. You end up, all those little flaws and little mistakes and little things that are natural, you know, become amplified to the point that you can't do what you need to do anymore. And of course, it can be substance abuse, turning to drugs or alcohol or harmful behaviors to find comfort in the unhealthy coping mechanisms that you created for yourself. Self-sabotage can also manifest as you being indecisive, completely being indecisive, not knowing, like you second guess everything that you do, and you end up being frozen, being unable to make a decision. It's you being drawn to bad relationships because they feel familiar. It's self-neglect, it's fear of success, and I'm sure there's so many more that I haven't listed, but self-sabotage can really manifest in so many ways. And when that force causes us to self-sabotage, when it takes over emotionally, it takes over physically, it takes over how we see the world, how we interpret, how we see ourselves, and how we see our relationships outside of the dysfunctional family. It takes over our decisions, it takes over like our careers, it takes over our ability to take care of ourselves. It takes over everything, because that's the force that drives and that leads us to being unable to escape those patterns that we're stuck in, and those things that keep repeating themselves, and that harm us in our lives over and over. Now I'm going to talk about myself a bit because I want to share with you how I live this self-sabotage. Now, I grew up extremely isolated. There were no aunties, no uncles, no cousins. There was no family that I knew because they all lived in a different country. And I've never gotten to know my extended family. I only knew my father, and there was my older sibling in the house, and that was it. And once I reached my preteen years and my teen years, they were never home. My dad was always working, and my sibling, he was off, doing his things. And basically I was left alone in this empty house with a very, very sick woman. I mean, some of the stuff she did, I was a kid, and everything is dark, everything is depressing, everything is, evil, everything is madness, everything is, it was this perpetual, incredible darkness. And nobody was doing anything about it. And as a kid, I tried to play nurse, and I tried to do psychologist, and I tried to be soothing. But as soon as I, tried to get to know my world, and I was completely demonized for it. And, her behavior was absolutely enabled and nurtured almost, And so this environment, it led me to internalize 3 messages that have nestled within my mind, in my subconscious, in my nervous system, and the beliefs that I had about myself. Now, those messages were, number 1, nobody will ever love me. Nobody will ever love you is actually something that I grew up with, and that was verbally told to me every single day, ever since I was a child, and through teenagehood and early adulthood until I went no contact. We're talking about 30, 40 years of this being said to me. In my language, she would say, nikt cię nie będzie kochał I umrzesz sama, which means no one will ever love you and you're gonna die alone. And that was when I was a child, that was told to me consistently. And so there was this belief that nobody could ever love me. There was this belief that I don't belong, okay? Which is what enablers have taught me when I was young, because there was something off about me apparently, you know? I didn't fit in the culture that they were painting for me. I was supposed to, I didn't fit the role. You know, I was a failure, I wasn't smart, I was problematic, I always caused problems. The antagonisms and the fights at home and the lack of emotional safety, you know, the lack of connection that I had with my own mother, like the emotional neglect that I was going through. Like I said, it was all deemed as normal. And this in turn led me to understand that I would never belong. Because if this was normal, why couldn't I fit? Why couldn't I be loved? Why was I rejected by my own family? And why was I always at the bottom of the pecking order within my family? You know, I was nobody's number one. It was, you know, nobody cared about my education, about my financial security for me, about, you know, my financial health, about my personal development. Nobody bothered checking in with me, you know, on any of the steps that I undertook as I was growing up. I was on my own for everything. And this really led me to feel like there was something wrong with me. I didn't belong anywhere. And then the third thing was that individuation leads to rejection. My boundaries led to abandonment. And asserting myself would lead to abandonment and abuse. So that was a belief. And voicing my limits, you know, will lead to abandonment. Showing signs of trauma will lead to abandonment. Getting sick leads to, actually, all those things did lead to abandonment. And that really viewed my perspective on all the relationships and all the interactions that I've had in my life from that point on. Now, nobody will ever love you. That belief, you know, it drove me to become excessively possessive of the people that got close to me. And it led me to develop like this scarcity mindset. It almost felt like there would never be any love, enough love to go around if I didn't fight for it with my life. So I thought if people would pay attention to other stuff or to other people, there would not be any love left for me. And so I really held on to people so tightly and so unhealthily. Like I didn't have an identity. My identity was just holding on to people. And it was either hovering between holding on to people or isolating myself, because it didn't work out with the people that I was trying to hold on to desperately, because obviously I pushed them away with that behavior. And so nobody ever loved me, will ever love you became a self-fulfilling prophecy, as my behavior was driven by that belief, and then I acted out on that belief. Nobody will ever love me also makes us easy targets to predators, because predators can smell people pleasers from miles away, and it becomes so easy for them to dominate and control a people pleaser. You know, you become codependent because you idealize people and you accept things that a healthy person would never accept in their lives in the first place, you know. And so why do we do this? Why does this happen? Well, this is because the subconscious is trying to fix something that it could never fix. The core motivation behind these self-sabotaging behaviors is the subconscious mind attempt to fix similar situations in the present so that we can heal a past wound that we couldn't resolve as a child. Okay, so, and this will cause us to also become drawn to familiar pain. You know, there's this attraction to familiar patterns of pain and rejection. You know, the mind will seek to master these situations that that you feel you failed at. As a child, you felt that you failed at, being enough for your parent. And so the mind is going to continuously try to fix this unconsciously as you grow into adulthood. And so, we may meet people that feel so familiar and feel so good, but that's actually, that feeling of familiarity is actually really dangerous and really misleading when we come from dysfunctional families. Now, the second belief that I talked about earlier, I don't belong, that caused me to feel like I didn't belong, even in places where actually, that were actually good for me. Thinking back, I was actually made to feel really welcome in many places, but I could not see it because I don't belong. That feeling, it puts like a lens in front of your eyes in which you view the world. It's sort of like you're constantly looking for proof to validate that feeling that you don't belong. So as soon as the smallest thing happens, as soon as something happens, it's like, oh yeah, this means I know what this is. It's this proof that I don't belong here. I am out. Black and white, we're gone. In my travels, I lived in South America for some time with a family, a girl who was my friend and her mother. And, they treated me like family. They treated me, they gave me a home and they made me feel accepted throughout that period that I lived in South America. But for me, I was so restless. It was that restlessness. I got bored. I kept looking to the horizon for the next thing that I could do, the next place that I could go, the next thing, always the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, Because this feeling of restlessness controlled everything I did. I don't belong created this feeling of permanent restlessness. I could not rest, and it controlled me. And I did the same thing with many jobs too, even in places that I was appreciated for my work and such. After a while, the restlessness would always come. And also that feeling that everybody hates me, and that drove me to keep moving and moving and moving and moving and changing and changing and changing and changing. I mean, that was just such a huge pattern in my life, And I even experienced near homelessness because of this, actually, because I just kept moving and moving and moving and changing and changing and changing. So, this dysfunctional, this unhealthy defense mechanism, it causes so much destruction in your life. And so avoidance, which is essentially what that boils down to, is a huge part of self-sabotage. To avoid the pain of potential rejection or failure, we may subconsciously steer clear of situations that could potentially lead to these outcomes. So it's like we keep trying to predict the future so that we could protect ourselves from the incredible pain that we went through in our lives, in our childhood, in our upbringing, And so running away was a huge self-sabotaging mechanism for me, and that I struggled with for a really, really long time. If I smelled even the possibility of disappointing someone, if I needed to set a boundary, I didn't know how to do it. And so it was easier for me to just run away and find a reason to just not, to amplify what they were doing and to run away instead of, having a conversation and setting a boundary and being assertive and then, healthy relationships will respect you for your boundaries. Feeling wise, it feels totally different, And so we go in these loops that the flight response is actually meant to protect us from perceived threats. And when it becomes a learned unhealthy defense mechanisms because of complex trauma, it actually reinforces our isolation and our unworthiness because we keep running and running and running and pushing away. And very often this is really driven by this black or white thinking, like you're with me or you're against me, or the smallest things will trigger this huge reaction because we think it's going to lead to something terrible. And then the third belief that I talked about, that belief that individuation will lead to rejection, this led me to be completely unable to respect myself. And instead of, adopting my own values and my own character strengths, and paying attention to what I really wanted and what was important to me. I would instead look to what other people wanted, and I would shapeshift, and I would people please, and I would deplete myself for other people because of all of these subconscious beliefs that live within me. And the other thing that you'll find is that growing up in an environment where abuse and neglect are normalized and not acknowledged as wrong, it will lead to internalizing the belief that you actually don't deserve good treatment, that you have to go out of your way to people please, or that you don't deserve good things coming your way. You just don't. It's never going to be enough what you do to deserve a good thing to come your way. Now, all of this stuff lives in our subconscious, and then it drives everything we do if we don't become aware of it. So the content of your subconscious, it wants to be seen. It wants to come out. No part of you wants to be suppressed. And so the more that you suppress parts of you, the more it's actually going, your behavior is actually going to be driven by everything that you're suppressing. Carl Jung, he famously had a quote, and it says, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this means that true self-awareness and personal growth, they don't just come from ignoring or, suppressing or denying our darker aspects, but it's comes by acknowledging and understanding where those aspects come from. Understanding that we actually have those aspects as well. Knowing where they come from so that we can then learn to manage them. And we can then learn to give ourselves what we actually need so that we don't self-sabotage anymore. Self-sabotage comes from unconscious beliefs and unresolved psychological conflicts. So by bringing these unconscious elements into consciousness, you can actually begin to address and heal from them. So from my personal experience, a few key points that I want to tell you about this. First of all, you have to pay attention to the patterns in your life. Do you keep attracting unhealthy relationships? Do you keep changing jobs? Do you keep moving? Are you choosing to live do you keep getting sick and because you keep choosing to live an unhealthy lifestyle, Like, for example, you're turning to drugs and alcohol or isolation or food as an unhealthy coping mechanisms, Are you shape-shifting and never giving yourself permission to actually tell the truth about who you are to people, about your life, about what you dislike or what you like? You got to pay attention to those tiny little patterns, these habits that you actually do every single day unconsciously, because those little habits that you do, they actually accumulate over time, and then they bring you towards a direction, because where you're going is actually an accumulation of all those tiny little choices that you make every single day. When you set goals and when you start going on the right path, it's gonna feel uncomfortable. It's gonna feel wrong. Everything in your body might feel like, I don't want to do this, and you might actually even get physically sick. You might actually sleep a lot more. You might get a cold. You might get like a skin reaction. You might there's a lot of things physically. This stress could actually manifest physically in many different ways for you. So the trick is to actually continue doing those small little tiny changes that are positive for you, even though your body everything within you is pulling you to go the other way. And ensuring that what you make is aligned with your decisions and that is aligned with your goals is really, really, really hard thing to do. It's really hard, and it feels really, really uncomfortable. And then the trick is to do them anyways, despite all of that stuff that happens, because that's how it feels like. As you practice doing this, it's gonna slowly start losing power over you. But the other thing too is just remember one thing as you do this work, is that you actually have to really acknowledge what you feel. When it comes, when this self-sabotaging feeling comes, it's really important that you name it. Like, okay, I feel the feeling of anger. I have the sensation of depression. I have the sensation that I want to drop everything, that I'm useless. I'm really angry right now and I don't know why. Like, you have to name what you feel and give yourself a safe space to acknowledge what you're feeling. Don't suppress it. Give yourself space to feel what you're feeling, and then do what you gotta do anyways. So the other thing that's really important is that you need to be real with yourself and who you are, and be real about the parts of you that, things that you do but you're not actually aware that you're doing. Acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we keep hidden or that we deny. That's actually what's called shadow work. And the idea is to actually become really brutally honest with yourself, and to actually not lie to yourself about the things that you do to yourself to self-sabotage. Like, really pay attention to your patterns and not lie to yourself about what you do anymore. This process, it really requires brutal honesty to work, actually. And when we do this, when we learn to confront our self-sabotaging behaviors and to break them, we actually have to confront many aspects of ourselves that are really, really uncomfortable and that are really painful to acknowledge. I mean, this could be acknowledging traits of jealousy, acknowledging traits of like anger, insecurity, or selfishness, or, qualities that, faults that we actually might prefer to attribute to others and never to ourselves. We might, get upset at someone because they're taking all our time and energy, but then we might also be doing the same thing to other people, trying to take all of their time and energy because we think that because we haven't been acknowledged within our own families, right? So we want to be acknowledged by other people, and so we might inadvertently do the same thing to other people. Just keep, trying to get people to pay attention to us, and to be other people's number one without giving them any room for their own things. As an example, for example, So we have to really become aware of these things that we're doing that perpetuate, the self-sabotage in our lives, So becoming conscious of our dark side and learning to understand where it comes from, why we do it, and it will allow us to take control over our lives and not have it control us. We have to become really, really conscious and brutally honest with ourselves about this. So, personal development is not a one-time event. It's like going to the gym. It's repetition. It's ongoing work, and you have to keep practicing. You have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. So, be patient with yourself as you do this. Treat yourself with kindness. Treat yourself with compassion. Love and trust yourself, as you work to untangle yourself and bring yourself to a healthier and better place. Learning to become authentic is to become aware of your dark side, is to become aware of your self-sabotaging behaviors so that they no longer control you, and so that you can give yourself a chance to change the course of your life and align your future with what you want for yourself, with what is healthy, what is peaceful, so that you can be free, be free of them, be free of that system, be free of those loops, be free of that bubble and of that life, be free of it. Recreate you deserve to recreate your own healthy and peaceful life, where you no longer carry false burdens and things that just don't belong to you anymore. So I hope this helped you, and I'll see you soon.